Hey everyone, join us. Welcome for the first AWE Nite LA of 2022. We got some pretty exciting guests this evening.
Hey everybody.
Yeah, if you're in, tell everyone, join us. Welcome for the first AWE.
Tell us where you're from.
Yeah, Ori's staying up late for us tonight.
Hey, Cincinnati.
Romania, awesome.
Whoa. I was just in Florida, not in Sarasota.
Well, fantastic. Yeah, just out of curiosity, this is an education event focusing on, how XR is being applied to education space, the skills required to create XR for education use cases. What are some topics that are interesting to you, the audience, in regards to this topic? Anything you're excited to hear us talk about this evening?
Hey, Andres, how are you? Good to see you. And hello from India. So Andres, I know that you're a professor. And so is there anything in particular that you are interested in regards to AR, VR and education? Are you using it in your classes at all? Would you like to be using it?
Sweet. Why don't we get started then? We're fortunate enough, again, being on the West Coast. Ori's in New York, but he is our fearless leader. He stayed up late for us tonight to kind of kick the show off and tell us a little more about kind of what's going on with AWE in 2022. Ori, why don't you tell us what's going on?
Thank you, Ray, and hi, everybody. Welcome to Untitled LA with a special evening about XR in education. I hope you and your families are all doing well amid the Omicron surge. And I want to thank you for joining us here for the first time on AWE.Live. We just launched it. It's a free platform available for the entire XR community. And it will run a non-stop stream of online XR events like this meetup. We have all-night meetups that are now running in 25 cities around the world. And they will all be hosted here. So you won't have to look for it elsewhere. It's all going to be here under the agenda. On Fridays, we plan to host the podcast by Charlie Fink and Ted Shilowitz called the Week in XR. So every Friday, 12 p.m. Pacific time, you can check it out here. We have a bunch of really cool guests. And there's a lot of more XR goodness planned here with partner events. In February, we have the Poly Web XR Awards coming up. There's an interesting session about VR and autism hosted by Bob Fine from the IVRHA. And Gatherverse Summit, a new event by Christopher Lafayette, will also run here in February. And once you're here, definitely check out the awesome people on the platform. You can access people from the directory on the right sidebar, and then, pick people, connect with them via chat or video. And if you're up for meeting new folks, there's a smart matching feature which will recommend you XR professionals meet based on your profile selections. There are currently about 4,000 people on the platform, and we see new people joining every day. One more note before I let Ray take it over. This year, AWE will run in 3 major in-person events. After the success of doing it in person last November in California, it will come back to California this June. There's an event in China, AWE Asia in August, and AWE Europe will come back in Portugal this year in October. So that's about it. That's all I wanted to share with you. I wish you a fantastic meetup. We have some awesome people on the panel. So let's get down to business. Take it away, Ray.
Absolutely. Actually, Susan's going to be kind of taking this, kicking this off, and Eric is actually going to be our moderator this evening, which I'm really excited about. Susan, you're muted.
There we go. Hi. I'm Susan Oslin. I'm the co-producer of On Nights LA. I co-produce with Raymond, and tonight he's on the panel. So this evening I'm going to introduce everybody and get you all set up. So today we're talking about education, and we're taking a very broad look at education. We have a very eclectic panel, and so really interesting mix of points of view. Eric Elder is going to be our moderator, and Eric has over 20 years in education, in gaming, visual effects, and he has a company or a program, Wizards, that's actually in many parts of the globe, where he's bringing education on technology, specifically gaming, and now in VR. So it'll be very exciting to hear from him. Nonny de la Peña, which I think all of you probably know. She is a pioneer and trailblazer in virtual reality. She's a journalist and a storyteller. And so it's going to be really exciting how she'll talk about how she brings real life situations to VR. And Tiffany Raber from... Tiffany, I'm so sorry. I know you're associated with the Army, but I don't have the specific branch. But she's into biomedical visualization, and she works at the cross section of technical art, biomedicine, and virtual reality. She works, she'll tell you specifically in which part of the service that she works in. And she's also a PhD in cognitive neuroscience. So that will be a very interesting perspective. And then Raymond is going to talk about the role of virtual beings in education, how we have a need for them, what they can provide, and we'll get into all of that. And so we have a very great panel for you today, a very interesting conversation. So if you have specific questions, please be sure to put them in the chat so we can be sure to cover them. And I'm going to hand this over to Eric and let him proceed.
Great. Thank you so much, Susan. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I think we got a very exciting panel and conversation all about XR and education. I think what I'd like to do is just go around the panel for the first portion and do a little present, past, future. So if we could just go one by one and talk about just briefly what you're working on right now in terms of XR and education. And then, maybe a story or a share about something exciting that you've done in the past, and then where you see things going. And then if we have time allowing, after that conversation, I'd like to get into a bit about really the distinction between XR education and XR training, meaning like how do you train people to produce the content versus content that is educational or training based. And then it looks like we already got some really great questions. So we will definitely allow a bit of time at the end for questions. All right. So I'll kick it off. Right now, I'm currently working on our project, the XR Wizards Lab. We were really fortunate to receive a EPIC mega grant to launch a pilot program at LA City College, in which we took a group of students there and basically gave them an intensive course on XR, like an overview, and then work with them to develop pitches and then some prototype projects over the last year. We're still working with one of those teams to develop their prototype on the Quest headset using Unreal. And we're really proud of the fact that we got this team. They had, when they started, no XR experience, and they got to a basic working prototype in just a matter of months with the educational program that we put together, this Wizards technology that we've been developing over the last 20 years, first to work with video games, and then now we're applying it to XR. So that's just a bit of what we're currently working on. Nonny, right before the panel, I saw the overview of the new program that you're engaged in. Would you like to tell us a bit about that?
Sure. So I've been fortunate enough that Arizona State University has decided to just double down on XR. And anybody out there looking for positions, you should definitely take a look at what the Herberger Institute for Design, or ASU, job openings, because they've got like, I think altogether it's like 18 people hired around the immersive XR space. But as part of that, they have renovated the wonderful old Herald Examiner building in downtown LA. And I was offered the ability to direct a new program, become a founding director for a new program on narrative and immersive media. And that program is going to have a graduate degree that we're going to start next fall, a master's program, so that people can really understand how to direct, produce, manage XR projects. It will also include a research center that will privilege the body. When we think of XR, we know that it's spatial, it's immersive, that we react in this physical way. So it'll be a research center. We'll also have a kind of skunkworksy space and a community center that is our space is beautiful. So we're looking forward to ideas from the community who might want to use our space to have events. And then finally, we hope that we'll be able to take a lot of what we're learning and bring it into policy. There's some really obvious ones, like, we have a water board, we have an ed board, we should have a technology board in every city, county, et cetera, because technology's become a basic right. So I'm hoping we're gonna be able to inform some of that work as well. And that's still while wearing my Emblematic hat, which if you know, with Emblematic, we've been producing XR content for actually, I had the first piece at Sundance ever in VR in 2012, and it's a decade ago now, you guys. So anyway, for a long time. But that's why I'm excited about this new program, because it's a very inexpensive master's, and it means that a lot of people can come in who otherwise couldn't afford or felt like it was just off limits for them. And we can now really hopefully change the demographics of who's working with these new technologies and whose stories are being told and how those stories are interfacing with technologies that have been off limits previously.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nonny. I'm really excited about this program and can't wait to talk with you more about it and see it blossom. So thank you.
Thank you.
Tiffany, how about you? What have you been up to?
Yeah, a lot. So I am currently a research scientist at the Army Research Lab. And I do work in the operational space and collaborative XR, I guess what we call cross reality. But I also serve as consultant for a nursing college as their learning experience designer, and they're pumping out a lot of healthcare professionals right now, and we're trying to figure out how to use XR in that space. And of course, the challenge of having online students, and how do we introduce XR to those students as well, because I truly believe that everybody should have access to these technologies. But I started as an artist first, and then I added a science degree, and I went and got my master's in biomedical visualization. So I'm still working and doing surgical simulation for students, residents, nurses. But I think sticking to kind of the topic here, because I'm still a student, I'm doing my PhD at UC Irvine in cognitive neuroscience, but I found a great passion for teaching others the skills of whatever they want to do in the XR space. So I got my opportunity to start teaching when I was still learning a game engine, and I was teaching adults that had maybe a background in programming, and way better than I, but like wanted to learn how it applied to VR, or maybe people in marketing or entertainment that just wanted to get their hands on it. And that's when I really discovered that VR, XR, it's a kind of intersection amongst many fields, and that it has so many use cases. And so in my time of being in the weeds, outside of that, Eric, you and I have worked together, and I love mentoring there at the Army Research Lab. We do a lot of children's programs, exposing them to STEAM-based XR technologies. And then also I work with a nonprofit, Arts Bridging the Gap, and I run the once Girls Make VR, but now to make it more inclusive, we've renamed it to Futures Rewired. And at a LA public school, we teach students how to build virtual reality experiences using Unity, and they are 6th and 7th graders. So I really love seeing the future just kind of go off and make whatever they want. And I think that it's going to become a very common language that's needed in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Tiff. Mm-hmm. And Ray, what have you been up to, guy?
Hey, everyone. Yeah, so I mean, other than helping produce these events, I've been in VR for a long time. I was a pre-Facebook Oculus employee, so I've been running around the VR space for a long time. But for the last couple of years, my focus has really been on this concept of virtual identity, digital humans, synthetic media, and the M word, yes, a shock, the metaverse. And I think there's this exciting opportunity for these technologies to really kind of make education accessible, being able to capture the greatest minds in the world and make the interaction with them accessible to anyone, anywhere through this XR technology, so that instead of, possibly the colleges of the future will be essentially, virtual social spaces that we log into, and where we get spoken to by, Albert Einstein and other sort of AI powered, or perhaps, other physical virtual humans out in the metaverse that can teach you all the greatest things in the world. And I think that that's going to be a very exciting and really kind of a drastic shift in the way that we are going to engage with education in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Ray. Yeah, definitely something that I'd like to discuss a bit later on. We've heard a lot of feedback in the educational space, particularly K through 12, about the frustration that students and teachers have had in terms of making the transition into virtual. And we know that these technologies that we've been working in for years now can ease that once they are set up, designed properly. And we can't do it alone, right? We need to work with younger people and get them involved, the ones who are interested and show a passion for it, and train them how to create these technologies as well, and really get their feedback on what's really going to work for them in the future. So fantastic. Okay, next thing I'd like to go around robin on is, could you share maybe if not your first experience in XR intersecting with education, maybe like one of the most significant moments that you could think of in your career in terms of education in XR. We'll go back to Nonny.
So this was really also what helped get my start was I was in after I built the virtual Guantanamo Bay prison project actually in 2007 in Second Life, so early Metaverse, because it was I was a journalist, I'd worked in doc, et cetera, and taught myself to code, and I wanted to take this place that was off limits to most citizens and press, and even though it was virtual, make it accessible and help people understand the lack of habeas corpus, et cetera, going on at Gitmo. So, but that led me to the lab of Mel Slater and Maria Sanchez Vives at the University of Barcelona. And it was Mel Mavi's project there that really resonated. They were studying, along with a professor in England, the bystander effect, right? And this is this idea that the more people there are in an event, the less likely somebody will try to intervene. And the professor in England, because there's so many cameras everywhere, had access to all this closed circuit television footage of bar fights. And what they were looking at in this bar fight was something quite different. They saw that the more people were there, the more likely somebody would try to intervene. But if I stopped you from intervening, then all hell would break loose. So, and then they also found in a third of the cases that the bystander would literally go up to the perpetrator and clock him once and do this kind of like over, right? So like this kind of mix of really different than what we've read about the bystander effect. So you can't really put people in the middle of a violent situation. So Mel and Mavi did this thing where they put you in a bar, and this guy's at the bar and this other guy walks in, and the guy at the bar turns around, he's obviously drunk sounding, and the other guy's got on the wrong sports jersey, the wrong team. And the guy at the bar is about ready to just beat the shit out of him, right? And I remember the feeling of being in that headset and the big cable, and it was a wide 5 headset that, right, that Face and Mark Bolus used to make out of, and I remember just pulling on the cable to get closer to the situation. It was like my first full, embodied experience in XR. And it was after I did that piece, I knew I could no longer have my audience out there. They had to be in the story with me. But the amazing thing about that piece was that they very clearly showed that this concept that's been taken for granted in psychology, that the bystander effect was true, was completely inaccurate. And the bystander effect was all established based on this New York Times piece about a young woman named Kitty Genovese, who apparently was murdered while all the bystanders didn't do anything. So after they made their study and after that piece was made, then the New York Times actually came out and issued a mea culpa and said, actually, our reporting was wrong and people did try to help. So to me, that was a really, really interesting moment educationally, a combination of real footage, using XR for research, understanding the impact in psychology, revisiting all these issues, and of course, very personally impactful for me, thinking this is a medium that I'm going to spend the rest of my life in. Really, that was the moment.
Awesome. Thanks, Nonny. Let's go back to Ray.
Yeah, definitely. Regrettably, a lot of my best work is under NDA. But I spent the last year really digitizing a few CEOs and a few celebrities. And I think, a big call out today is Martin Luther King Day, and I think one of the exciting things that's really happened in the last few years as it relates to kind of, recreating history in VR, digitizing humans is that Time Magazine, in collaboration with Riot here in LA, has been working on this Martin Luther King experience, where they've found someone who looked a lot like Dr. Martin Luther King. They built a virtual double of him and then allowed this performer to learn the physical kind of performance of the I Had a Dream speech. And then they recreated that with a virtual being of Dr. Martin Luther King, that you can then be in the audience and go and kind of see this speech in the environment at in Washington D.C. at Washington D.C. At the location that it took place, in the environment, and get to actually see this and experience this sort of moment in history. And I think that these sort of moments are just going to become more and more common. And this idea of being able to re-experience history, I think, is going to be one of the best kind of modes of learning and learning history and a lot of other type of topics as a result of it.
Awesome. Thank you. Tiffany.
Yeah, I have two things of mention. So my first one is wow factor here for everybody. I'm sure people have been in VR much longer than I. Was when I was in my first Unity class in 2017, and I think I had put a headset on maybe twice, and I still wasn't sold yet. And I was working on an app for my research thesis, and it was about detecting prostate cancer. And I was recreating 3D models of the prostate using medical imagery. And I had somebody come up to me and say, wow, you should put this in VR. And I was like, oh, why would I want that? Like, what's the benefit? And I have to say, you know, what sold me on VR and wanting to create VR wasn't my first experience in it, but it was like that comment. I was like, I'm going to dedicate my creativity and my career to always being very critical of why to put something in VR, why to put something in AR, what makes it different, why is there a need? It's not just a want, it's not just a cool factor. So that to me was the start of really like diving into wanting to be extremely educated about the XR space. But I think fast forward a couple of years, a really pivotal moment for me for teaching is that with the Army Research Lab, we do a summer program called GEMS, so Games in the Education of Math and Sciences. And we have a really strong relationship with Compton Unified School District. And we were doing one of their computer science expos. We, you know, brought a headset. It wasn't anything like really exciting, I guess, for us. We're in that bubble. But I had two 6th grade boys come up, and they looked really shy. And I was like, do you want to try this on? They have never heard of it. And I was just kind of taking them through the process of getting the headset on. And these were two probably 8 or 9-year-old Black boys. And the joy when they put on that headset, like, I think we're all very familiar of what it's like we see on the news what it's like to be a Black child in America. There's a lot of heaviness and conversations that white children don't have to have. And they wear that, they have to carry that. And when I saw them, like, I truly saw like just joy. Everything from their physical reality was let go. They were in the space. And I actually captured a photo, and it's like one of the most important photos that I've ever taken, because it showed me that like accessibility is an exposure is everything, because they may come back in 5 years when they're in high school and say, that's what I want to do because this person showed me that. And if that wouldn't have happened, then maybe that, you know, that situation wouldn't be a possibility. So that's probably the most pivotal when it comes to education in XR.
Wow, that's awesome, Tiffany. I'd love to see that image at some point.
Yeah, I'll share it.
Yeah, for me, again, I've been in education and media for really all of my career, 30 years now. Founded a video game production program, one of the first, and training people on the Unreal game engine about 20 years ago. And I guess it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, while I was teaching some other classes, my world building class and story pitch at LMU. They opened up a new facility here in Silicon Beach, and you know, we're looking for programming, and also what I got was looking for a way to really have their branding of being the University of Silicon Beach have meaning, and with you know, XR Research Labs being right there, Google moving in, and having so many graduates that work in the XR space nearby, I just thought that the most appropriate thing that they could do would be to build an XR laboratory. And that's really where the idea of XR Wizards Lab was born. You know, we did do some events there. We had, some courses and workshops, but ultimately I wound up running the pilot, with the EPIC Mega Grant at Los Angeles City College. But there was, again, something about that moment when we were having the conversation, and when I first started developing the concept for this lab, I noticed that of course LMU wasn't the only one. I had talked to several different schools, and I think, again, 5 years ago, I think it was still a little early for most schools, but all of them are faced with this problem or this challenge of how do we prepare our students for these careers in XR of the future. Having so much experience in education, I know the challenges of putting any new program together, going through accreditation, getting things approved. It's a years, not a months or weeks long process normally. And so I just thought that having a program that set adjacent to existing media programs would be the way to go, because you could have a structure that was nimble enough to keep up with how fast XR is changing and advancing. And I just felt like any kind of bachelor's program, especially several years ago, that was conceived of and put together would be surely out of date by the time those students graduated, and would be surely a disservice to the students. So I'm just excited to see other laboratory structures and situations really starting to take place and form. Again, super excited about the program that Nonny is developing with the university here. I think that things are really starting to take off and move in the space. So finally, with that, just one more round robin here. Where do you see this all going? Like, if you put on your or put your crystal ball in front of you and look 5 to 10 years out, what do you see, or what would you like to see happen in terms of XR training and education? And we'll take it back to Nonny.
So clearly there's two things here, right? One is that I think people are aware of is the effectiveness of utilizing the body in terms of learning. So when I say that, I mean that when people are taking in information, that if it's not just a flat screen, but in fact they're doing something, that their body actually creates a memory of the experience, that knowledge is much more, it's better retained, and it usually has a level of accuracy that may not be achieved when you're just sitting watching or just sitting reading, which that's not, there are some things, of course, that are esoteric and better to be thought about on the page, but there's a lot of training and education that should be physical. The other part of it is, how are we going to help educators participate in this new world? It's one of the reasons why, I have a very prototype platform called Reach.Love, that the idea is a button-based system to let people just make immersive content, almost to a real beta. I would call it an alpha now. If you go to beta.reach.love, you can play with it, but we've got an alpha version coming out soon. But to give you an idea of like, how is this utilized? So it's just literally, you don't have to code. You literally can just use button to symbol the content. It doesn't have a lot of physics. It's meant to be really a more simple tool. But here's a good example. We had a professor from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and he had discovered a pictograph on a Colorado plain where they thought there was no early prehistoric humans. And he immediately made a 3D model of it. He scanned it, did photogrammetry of it, and then he shot himself on a green screen, because you can come in as immersive characters like the Martin Luther King character, or you can come in just using a green screen, so it's free and easy to do. And he did a lecture about that plateau, about that rock, about that he normally would have delivered, with the students having no idea what, some slides of the rock. But now students could come in, and if they had a headset, they could walk around. If they could only watch on their computers, they could at least move around like because it's like any game, you can use your WASD keys or your arrow keys to move through the space. And they could actually get an idea of the size of the rock, the size of the pictograph, and be there with the professor giving a lecture. And obviously after what we've seen this last year, we know that these kind of things are really important. And that kind of ability for a professor to immediately assemble the content he needed to in order to convey the information in a way that was going to be more engaging for the students. I'm all for it. I definitely am a little opposed to the kind of environments that are being built that think about education and then have students come into a classroom where they have to go sit in chairs and be lectured to. It's that to me is, a absurd almost keeps striking me a mortal wound. Like, that's not how you use these environments. So, you have to be thinking about what is that information and how do I convey it in a way that resembles our spatial world, right? I mean, we all got compressed into a flat thing. We're all compressed into a flat video. We're returning that into volume. And so for my crystal ball is that classrooms, the kind of experience Tiffany witnessed, that is going to be the norm. We're going to be talking about the glasses instead of, we're not going to have, we're not going to end up all of us with that neck looking down at phones, right? They say that you can see on x-rays and things now. So it'll be a much more, a lot of easier tools for folks to create the content in order to teach with, but also spaces where students are going to get to move around in order to learn. That's why, when we know that every, last word on that is when we know that every phone has got a LiDAR camera, we know that the world is all going to be captured with dimension. This flat business and sharing of the flat story is going to shift and change. And I'm really excited to see what kind of stuff people are going to make.
Awesome. Thanks, Nonny. Tiffany, what about you? What do you see in the future of XR education?
Yeah, I think that probably the most critical point would be, and I think Nonny really touched on it as well, is adoption. And as creators, we need to keep in mind as a first priority that people want to experience things that are easy. People want to, be able to get into the technology and for it almost to seem like the technology doesn't exist. So that is good tech, is when it doesn't even seem like it's there because it's so ingrained and ubiquitous with your life. It makes your life simpler. And we see that, some pushback with schools, with doctors, really with doctors. And it's like, this is going to be beneficial. It helps your students and you don't have to be there. And it's like, yeah, but what do I have to do? Well, you have to hook up this computer, or you have to, hit the on button. And if it shuts off, you got to restart. And we lost them. So I think as the technology becomes more accessible to all different types of people, then I think that's when we'll start to see more of an uptick in the use for education. But also really just being aware, I guess, the M word, if we're going to use it like that, being aware that really is to be in that space is a privilege, to be in VR is a privilege, and XR is a privilege. And I hope that, in the future, we can pull everybody along with us, because to be in the M word is to have everybody there. And there should be options to be in and out of that space. So also keeping in mind the people that may not adopt so willingly. So I see XR as being another way of learning, but also being very cognizant that there's still going to be some people that don't prefer to learn in that way. So we should always remember that, if we're going to be inclusive about like, oh, some of us are audio, some of us are visual, some of us like textbooks, let's not leave those people behind, because they still provide extreme value to that world.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
Ray.
Yeah, absolutely. I think some great points have been made. This idea of like, I laugh. There's a bunch of these kind of VR sort of like education platforms out there. And Nonny, I totally agree. It's like, why does a classroom have to look like a classroom in VR? I think there's this, I think there's a great company here in LA called CGO Studios. They specialize in historical reenactments, and they've done like the Wright brothers. They've done like an Anne Frank experience. And I think like this is what we're looking for in the future of education, is this idea of being able to go out and either with, some piece of technology, be it, eyeglasses on your head, something attached to a cell phone, maybe through the lens of a mobile device. Who knows what the technology looks like in the future? But again, I agree with Tiffany that it has to be very accessible. And I think that the making of these VR experiences has to be like the equivalent of like making a website or something like that, But we sit on the precipice of 10 million Oculus Quest 2 sold. There are going to be kids growing up in households that their first game console, their first kind of technology piece, is conceivably going to be one of these VR headsets, especially as we kind of move forward, right? And so I think the comfort and the understanding of this sort of technology is going to become much more ubiquitous in kind of coming generations. And so I think this opportunity to be able to kind of recreate history, create, science lab experiments that you can do, the baking soda and the vinegar volcano, that instead of having to make a mess in the kitchen floor, you're able to do this thing, on a tablet, in a VR headset. I think these technologies are going to become much more accessible, much more commonplace, especially just because like the technology that we're using now keeps getting more and more powerful. And I don't see any reason that that's going to stop. And so as a result, this is just going to become more and more accessible. That's really what I think. And, eventually maybe people don't actually go out to go to school, like it's that Ready Player, I think one of the great things about Ready Player One as a novel is that, and this weird thing is kind of omitted from the movie, is that the kind of education perspective in regards to that book is so great. This idea of people going into these virtual spaces, being taught by, either cartoon characters or historical figures, being able to interact with people from all over the world who happen to be in their VR, classrooms and things like that. I think that's what the future really is. Instead of going to these, education institutions, these physical places, ideally these physical places will become virtual, and then hopefully as a result of that become, a lot more affordable to attend, and you can get the same quality experience as that you would if you went to some sort of prestigious university. Now, I don't understand how that impacts then like the kind of, the fact that education institutions are huge financial environments and things like that. But I think that ideally we're going to find a way to kind of make all that work.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Ray. Yeah, I definitely agree with, and I think some great points were made as well from the panel. Definitely agree with you, Nonny, about this. That's been, being in education for so long in my career. This idea, especially for this generation and even the last one of kids, this idea of lecturing and using textbooks is just so outdated, and so it just does not work. And then I think about, what you're saying, Ray, where absolutely, this is going to be like, I my first console was the Atari 2600. I can only imagine being, 7, 8 years old and, having my first one be, a Quest, and just, the access, and then to be able to, learn how to actually build content in an Unreal or a Unity engine, my own, world, spaces, experiences, is excitement on a whole nother level, and I think opportunity as well. So yeah, definitely I think exciting days ahead in this space. Is going to be very interesting to see how all of this stuff plays out. I'd like to just do one more, get your thoughts or your feedback before we open it up to questions. Do you guys have any thoughts about this idea of, again, I feel like when you see XR education, in printed form, again, you can go a couple of different directions with that. Do you have any thoughts about the distinction between XR education in terms of training people to make content versus educational experiences in XR. Anybody like to jump in on that?
Yeah, sure. You know, I think this is interesting. It's kind of a cart in the chicken and the egg sort of scenario, right? You need to understand how to make this content to be able to create these experiences that ideally are transformational for people to want to go and either use these experiences or go off and be like, wow, I love this dinosaur experience. I want to create one that has to do with astronomy, you know? And I think that's why the tools, like what Nonny was describing with their Nonny, what was the platform? It's love.
Reach.love.
Reach.love. You know, this idea of making these.
I'll put it in the chat. But
Yeah,
people can
please.
see the data
And
too.
we'll send it out in the kind of post event, whatever, email or whatnot, if some of these kind of references that we're making. But yeah, I mean, I think these tools is being accessible. You know, I learned to make a website way back in the day, you know, hand coding HTML, and then, you know, Squarespace or whatever, it kind of popped up, and now everyone can make a very high sophisticated you know, website. I mean, I think with VR it's going to become the same way. I think a lot of people have kind of taken swings at making these tools, and I think we will continue to do that. But you know, I mean, I think much like people used to learn cursive, I think everyone's going to have a little basic knowledge of Unity or something like that, you know, in the next 10 years.
Oh, I think what we know is that people need to create, right? And I think that, you know, people sometimes think of art as kind of being an ancillary thing, but when you find out there's like, you know, 8 miles of pictographs in the Amazon. I mean, people need to make art, create stuff. And we learned that with YouTube, right? It's how many thousands and thousands of years of videos up on YouTube. People know how to, you know, need that thing. And I think that is going to be part of this too. People are going to move into the spatial content creation space, and we're going to see amazing things. And it's going to be shared in a different way. And maybe we're going to find that once they have those tools, because the content creators become such a part of the web of the way that we exist every day now, that maybe content will be, you know, shared differently. Maybe there'll be more of a curated way that education occurs, rather than such a one-way street where you know, education is sort of top heavy about like what you're going to learn. On the other hand, we mustn't forget that, you know, I know that Tiffany knows what I mean by getting the PhD. I had to learn about things that I never thought I would have to learn about. And I think it was a really good gives me a very good perspective in, you know, some curation of the content. So I think we're going to see that too, right? I think, Eric, there's also a huge and important niche here of training the teachers, and who's going to do that, and how are we going to do that? And I know we plan on doing some workshops at our new facility for not just educators, but anybody else who really needs to try to understand what this space is about, right?
Yeah, and I think part of what educators are going to need to begin to learn and incorporate, if they haven't already, is the you know, again, I love this idea of having this technology and the creation of this technology be as accessible as possible to everyone, right? But also this idea of not lecturing or teaching down to young people, and really creating educational environments that are more exploratory and that allow you know, for peer-to-peer teaching, that allow for exploration and experimentation, so that you know, students have somewhat of an opportunity to train and learn on their own. So I think that's something that I hope we'll start to see more.
And I mean, that's
in spaces.
I think you're totally right, Eric, and that's another really big reason why I'm such an advocate that we have got to be thinking about technology boards as much as education board or water board or electricity boards, because it has become a basic right. And we really do want anybody who needs access to education. And, you know, education is going through some very interesting moments. There's a lot of online, you know, ASU, the one thing that I love about Arizona State University is their whole charter is we're measured by who we include, not who we exclude. We're not an inclusionary university, and they have the largest number of first-gen kids and the largest number of indigenous from all around the United States. But they also will craft classes in very different ways. For example, we have a group in LA that are first-gen kids who, don't really know about going to college, so they come together to learn about what does it mean to get a degree? What does it mean if you want to be a business student? How do you understand what that means? And then they take their classes online. So it's kind of a flipped whole different thing, but it's another way of being educated. And I think that's also what we need to do, is think about this immersive education as being a way that we can diversify the different methodologies. As Tiffany pointed out, some people are audio people, some people are visual people. How do we meet them where they are in terms of learning processes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's also this huge opportunity where you have this Generation Z that is growing up and so involved in platforms like Minecraft and Roblox, where they're using very accessible tools to program and make their own content. Is primarily being used for games now, but there's no reason why those same tools or similar tools can't be incorporated into education, and those same young people could be creating educational experiences that could be just as engaging and emerging as what they're doing for fun.
Tiffany. Yeah, I think you bring up an awesome point about like Roblox and these like these tools that kids are learning how to make games and things like that. Yeah. Randall in the chat talked about like the idea of education without XR headsets, and I think that's perfectly applicable. I think there'll be all these different tools. VR headsets and the like. AR glasses, whatnot. I think it's all incredible, but the real value of it is making the education experience better. Than that, I guess, so that the retention is greater than it is in, I guess, the current format.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'd like to, again, there's some great questions here. I'd like to get to a few of them before we run out of time. So this is a good one here that's been, coming up for the last several weeks for sure. What has changed with the emergence, quote unquote, of the M word or the metaverse, and how this will impact education? Will it bring new layers to the already existing XR ecosystem?
I think I'll just mention quickly, without a doubt, and it's going to bring new layers, but I was actually at AWE and there was an artist, and I forget their name, that they were up on stage talking about some of the things that they had created using, I believe it was the Snap lens. And I really like what they said, because they were like, we're already in the metaverse, like it's being created. It's not like, when is it going to be done? Oh, it's done, everyone get in.
Right.
The World Wide Web is, it is a type of metaverse. And I think that we, just as we've done with, for me, like, I've always had a cell phone growing up and things like that, and then we transitioned into smarter phones and tablets and headsets, and like, it's just going to be, to me, like anything else. Like, we learn the vocabulary, and as we learn the vocabulary, then it becomes common talk, common platforms, kind of back to what you said, Eric, before, questioning about like the teaching versus consuming of information in these platforms. Not all of us make movies, but we certainly know what a director is. We certainly know what a producer is. And that's not obvious now. When we think of something like XR, it's like, well, what do these people do? And as that vocabulary expands, I think it'll become very, it's gonna happen very fluidly. But I do think that just like the internet, we've seen with the pandemic, the internet has made an extreme gap between, like, we know now who can access internet and who cannot, because it has really left people behind. And I think a lot of us kind of got an egg on our face when, even for me, when I'm teaching, it's like, okay, well, everyone download this. And it's like, wait, not everyone has that ability. And I think that we have to be really conscious going into this building of the metaverse, because that gap will widen. And to me, like to very kind of frightening extremes. And I think about like Ready Player One and like who will be in it and who will be out. So I do think that as we are bringing people in, like we really need to keep that at the forefront.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody want to say anything else about that last question?
Well,
Yeah,
I
I mean, oh,
Yeah.
I've been hanging out like in kind of virtual social spaces for a long time, and I remember even back in like 2006, kind of in the early days of alt space, there were people using these platforms for practicing foreign languages, doing meditation, things like that. So I think that looking at the kind of the expectation, can I, is this the Matrix? Can I go to some sort of virtual space and download Kung Fu, and now suddenly I'm an expert in Kung Fu? I don't know. That's probably a really, really far off, right? But the idea of a lot of these kind of practicing soft skills, being able to go to virtual lectures and things like that, these are things that, I mean, have been available for, the better part of the last 5 years, and before that were available like in this setting, going to, watching YouTube videos, watching live streams, things like that. And so I think that, in one capacity, there's all this shine and amazement about this technology, but at its core, like a lot of these tools are really kind of the same things we've been doing for a long time. And I think that that's one thing that I guess for me makes me excited about the future of this technology, because kids have learned how to use YouTube to learn things. What happens when they are able to go to YouTube and watch a video of how to change their oil, their tire, or some sort of automotive thing in a pair of glasses they can wear while they are doing it, and things like that. And I think that is like an exciting possibility in regards to this, regards to these technologies, is being able to, take your experts with you, being able to, go, and do something very highly specialized, but also being able to have the ability with this technology to have an expert show you how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nonny?
Yeah, I was going to say that also, we don't, I mean, I think the meta change does give us maybe a little bit more wind under our wings to go places. But, it also is going to be some very surprising parts when we gather in these virtual spaces. When we built our virtual Gitmo, we had the Camp X-ray cages. We chose to have a reflection space. We didn't show any waterboarding, just FYI. But there was an artist who decided he was going to recreate Gandhi's Salt March walk in Second Life. And so what he did is he had a treadmill, and he walked the treadmill for as many miles as Gandhi did. And one day, this Gandhi character, right, looking just like Gandhi, showed up in our Camp X-ray cage, right? So like completely strange encounters like that we can't even imagine. He became a very good friend, this artist. But these kind of interesting type of I also think, what is the metaverse going to be when it becomes the cross reality, as you said, right? I know that it's not going to be long before, when my son goes to college, I'm going to put on a headset and I'm going to be able to walk around his dorm room with him, right? And he'd be like, "Can you pick up your socks?" So but the more serious note becomes when we're all streaming and sharing our information, and I feel like there's been a lot of discussion about, what are the ethics that are like, oh, what is it about, showing virtual? The arguments have been, I think, badly framed, because for me, the more important one in the nonfiction world is, are you going to let people step over the bodies when there's an explosion? How are we going to be thinking about these really important shifts in the way that all of us will be able to occupy real world spaces and virtual spaces, right? It's going to be both, right? And that's when we need to be thinking what we as creators might be able to offer in early frameworks of ethics around this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. Great answers there. Do you believe that virtual reality will replace the in-person experience? Nonny's shaking her head.
No way. Like, I think it'll be a privilege. Like, I think Tiffany brings up a great point, that these technologies and this, this access is a privilege. I mean, I think the hope is that, especially seeing what happened with cell phones, right? Suddenly we went from, in the late 90s, like, business people, very important people at big companies carried these, fanny packs that had cell phones in them, to the point that, I don't know what the median age for a kid getting their first cell phone is anymore. But, I have friends who have kids who are 5, 6, and they have cell phones. So hopefully these type of headsets have enough of an impact that it follows the same course.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that what this has taught us this past couple years is that there's definitely some benefits of interacting virtually. Again, one of them is it's almost like time travel, right? Like, us all living in LA, we probably would have had to, leave 2 hours, maybe, depending on where we're coming from, to make it here. And, we're all doing this from, the comfort of our home. So that's definitely an advantage. But it's also a disadvantage that we can't, touch and feel each other, give each other a hug or a handshake. And I think that's something that we definitely all miss. So I don't think it will be a replacement. There's definitely a new future that is happening. We are experiencing it. We are building it as we go, and it's definitely going to be different than what we had before. But I don't think one is going to replace the other.
I mean, that being said, though, I look forward to the time when medical students their teachers tell them about the days when they used to actually have to practice on cadavers compared to actually, going through the virtual simulation in, VR in your dorm room or something like that. I think that there will be certain kind of elements, these incredibly physical sort of things that are sometimes more difficult to come by, that that is some of the exciting things you get from like a physical education courses and things like that I think VR is a very compelling replacement for.
Yeah, I know that's something that Tiffany could definitely speak to. I know I've had this conversation before about just specifically on that point of learning to operate on a human person. That's something that's very expensive and very difficult in terms of accessibility, that with a great medical simulation that takes a lot of the challenge out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, well, first, you definitely don't want anybody operating on you that hasn't practiced on at least one cadaver. Like textbooks have tried to replace it. I've myself have cut through many cadavers, and there's nothing like it. And the closest thing would be like the anatomage table, which is the 1-to-1 ratio table laying flat of a virtual cadaver. And I think that in some of the studies that I've done with past companies, is the real benefit here is the additional practice, the muscle memory. But when we're talking about like intricate stitching or anything hands-on, manufacturing, construction, architect, like anything that's really like detail oriented, it's just that additional training. It's that additional practice. And I think if VR were to ever have that potential of replacing in person, then we would lose a lot of the benefit of AR, because that is why AR has that huge potential, that even kind of where VR caps out is because as human beings, like, we crave being in real life and we need it, whether that's social skills or hands-on activity. When we're talking about being in a patient, like being in a surgery, Eric, the stress level of just being there. That's something that's like really hard to simulate in a virtual world as of now. So I think there's just still a lot of benefit of in person. When people can have that'll be there for quite some time.
Awesome, thank you. I'm open to. Oh, go ahead.
And spontaneity too, right? I mean, I think that in person you're going to have, it's hard enough to. The mics and who we are, who's going to speak and not. It's just a very different set of social rules that we follow through the video chat versus being in person, right? You can turn to somebody, you can look at somebody, you can not. I mean, just social cues are more recognized. There's just a lot of reasons why, in-person communication can be very, it's just never going to go away. There's, that being said, I think the flat communication is got to be an intermediate moment, right? Before we get into more being there more virtually in space in some sort of embodied form. But I do believe that just having a body in a space is just something different about it. And I think we all know that, right? And that touch is just something special and what makes us human, right? I always say that, tech touch will not be able to replace real touch, no matter what. And I'm glad for that. That doesn't mean that there isn't a really wonderful, massive educational practice that can be achieved using these immersive technologies.
Yeah. I think this is a question that actually connects to what we're already speaking about. What are your thoughts on the promise of turning classroom spaces into immersive environments using projectors and other environmental tech instead of using individual headset devices? So, what I'm seeing is more of like, one of those kind of globes, or, maybe using hologram technology so that you can physically be in the space, but we're also using technology as a layer. Any thoughts on that?
The holograms have gotten a lot less expensive to make, but I think what's interesting with AR and schools is they already have these lots of spaces that you can embed knowledge in. You can create very, very specialized, Pokemon Go's. This is really clear, I'm sure there's an explosion of stuff of being able to interact and do things. And that's the main thing about the difference between having a classroom display system, which can be engaging, there's no doubt about it, but it lacks the interactivity, right? A hologram is a very one-way street. And it's cool to be in that space with a hologram, but you're not really allowing the student to engage and physically begin to create a memory. That's this, you can create memories with your whole body as much as with just your mind. And there's a lot of work that's done on, what Andy Clark calls a natural born cyborg, that humans adopt tools outside their body, that we think with our body. We think, my husband just did a book, sorry, and I'll stop here, but on material culture and mathematics, on the rise of British physics. And the whole point is that when you go to do a complicated mathematical puzzle, you'll write it on a chalkboard, or you'll write it down, or you'll even use your phone. You're using your body to think. And I think that that's one of the things about having XR in a classroom where students can use their bodies to think. You're going to see some very rich explosion of educational practice.
Yeah, and I think also like the footprint of a VR classroom is a lot smaller than having to have physical locations, right? This idea of being able to just put on a headset kind of wherever you are in your room and your wherever, and being able to be in this virtual space. Like, I mean, I know we just talked a lot about kind of the nature of like connecting physically, but I think also this idea of being able to interact with people across the globe. I think that's this huge opportunity that you can do in a much easier way, and like you said, Nonny, in a much more compelling way, like building a jet engine together across a bunch of different time zones and a bunch of different continents together, versus trying to get all those people at the same place at the same time so that they can hopefully do it physically. I think that is one of the real powers of VR and education. Yeah,
absolutely. Great. Do we have any other questions from the audience? I think we just kind of answered Susan's last question there.
Yeah, I was going to say, Susan's question about kind of the changing the teaching paradigm.
Sure.
I do think that being a student myself, and also getting a lot of feedback from nursing students, thousands of surveys and just open-ended responses, I would really like to see XR bring the power back to the teacher. And I say this because students right now, what I'm observing is this growing frustration with, we have so many platforms, we have so many apps to do. None of it's centralized. My teacher isn't even teaching. They're just giving us something, turning something on. And I feel it too as a student, you know, hey, go read this textbook and talk about it. And I'm like, I go to school because I want that teacher experience. And I think that rather than making a ton of platforms and telling our instructors and our teachers, pick them and then give them to students, I would love to see teachers be able to customize and still teach within that environment. Because I think it has been taken away from them as technology is growing and these tools are becoming more brought into the classroom. Their voice is kind of being silenced a bit. And I mean, they're teachers for a reason, and they should be able to be the main focus for that student and the guider for that student.
Yeah, I agree, Stephanie. And again, I've heard this echoed many times over the last several years. There just is not, and I really feel a lot of empathy for, you know, all that our instructors are dealing with, our educators are dealing with, K through 12 and at college level, graduate level. You know, I mean, I feel like each educator kind of deserves to have their own, you know, technology, you know, support, you know, a technology teaching assistant, right? That just like somebody that just handles all of that technology stuff for them. I know the expense of doing something like that is, you know, completely out of reach, but I mean, wouldn't that be amazing so that our educators could, you know, it's not like they don't have enough to deal with in terms of lesson planning and one-on-ones and just putting it all together and then actually delivering the education, but to then have to deal with this whole layer of technology and really more often than not having to do it on their own. It's just, you know, it's really quite unfair. So yeah, again, hopefully, you know, again, I love Nonny's idea about having this like technology council or board that, you know, can help, you know, figure out a way to put a system in place so that, you know, our educators could be supported, because the technology is definitely not going anywhere. It's just going to be, you know, more of it, and it's going to advance. Hopefully, in many cases, it's going to get easier to use, but I still feel that support is needed
For a zillion reasons, right? You mean security.
Yeah.
You know, obviously education is crucial in relation to technology, but you know, the way cities function, it's really so important.
Great. Again, any other questions that we have from the audience? And if not, I think we can begin to wrap up. This has
Let's
been
bring Susan back.
yeah. Hey, Susan.
Hey, thank you, everybody. That was a really great conversation, and I want to know, maybe you guys want to put your contact information in the chat, so if anybody had further questions, they could reach out to you individually.
Sure.
We tend to like to do that. So now we're getting a question.
This is a really, really important question.
Okay, go ahead and answer it. That's great.
Yeah, because so, you know, Project Syria was a piece I did quite a few years ago that puts you on a street in Aleppo when a bomb goes off, and it's like, why are people fleeing Syria to refugee camps, right? We used a haptic vest. You could feel the explosion, but you know, I thought the audio was the most important thing because we used this real audio, et cetera, et cetera. But it turned out that this deaf woman who went through it was so profoundly moved by it. She was like writing me every day for like 2 weeks. We're having all this discussion about the content. So one of the things I really want to do at the center at ASU is to be thinking about, how do we use haptics for inclusion? How do we use these technologies we're developing and make sure that we have components where storytelling doesn't have to be privileging the eyes or the ears, but also the body and the feelings that you might feel to the body as well. So that's a really exciting, something I want to hopefully raise some funding towards, and really think long and hard about how do we make sure that as we develop these technologies and these new educational platforms, that we are thinking in a more holistically inclusive way. Hopefully that's the question.
Great, thank you.
Did anyone else want to address that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in regards to the, we don't know what the devices of, 5 years from now are going to look like, and a lot of people are really excited to see what Apple does. I think that is going to be a major inflection point for this industry, just because, Samsung had been making Android watches for years before Apple made an Apple Watch, and then Apple released their watch and the world turned upside down in regards to it, and so there's a lot of rumors in regards to that they're building something to enter this market, and I think that's going to be a very exciting time for everyone, and I think that will also signal a lot of other industries to get involved in regard to these technologies. And as we learn how to make these devices more powerful, edge computing, 5G, I mean, use all the buzzwords, they're all gonna make, I mean, I was at CES last week and or 2 weeks ago, and I saw something for 6G. So there's always gonna be technologies pushing the envelope, and as those technologies become adopted, it's gonna make ideally this experience, the form factor smaller, the processing faster, and as a result, it's gonna be a better, faster, cheaper experience for everyone.
Okay, great. Nonny, could you also put the name of your institution that in the renovated building downtown? I'd love to learn a little bit more about that. If you could put that in the chat, that'd be great too. I missed the name of it. So Ray and I do these events every 2 months. This is our 4th year. So our next event is going to be in March. And in March, we're going to do an event around immersion. What does it mean to be immersive? How do you create immersion? How does that impact? What are some of the things that bring people out of immersion? So it's going to be like immersion's presence, and also want to kind of distinguish. We talked about engagement a lot in the internet, and now we're talking about immersion, and how are the two different or the same. So we hope to see you back in March. We always do the 2nd Monday of the month, and we'll be on this platform, so you'll be able to find us. With that, I want to thank everybody for being here. Ray, I don't know if you had any last words before we...
No, I thought this was fantastic. It was fun to be a panelist. Thanks, Eric. Thanks for taking the reins. I thought this was a great one. Yeah, and I look forward to our next one in March. So tune in then. Use this cool platform. Reach out to us directly via the platform. See some of the other content that's coming out in regards to the other AWE nights, the other content that's being programmed on this that is not AWE night stuff. I think that the podcast that Ted is doing on Fridays that are is very exciting. So yeah, check out all the content, and let us know what you like, and feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah, 25 different cities around the world. It's pretty exciting to see this AWE grow globally. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Susan and Ray, for organizing and help putting this together. Tiffany and Nonny, thank you for being such awesome guests and joining us tonight. And this has been a blast. Thank you for everyone who's come to see us in the audience, and all the great questions as well.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Also, I want to point out that the purpose of this platform is not just to host these events, but it's also to have an ongoing place where we can network and connect. So you can also connect with the speakers directly through this platform. So take advantage of this platform. It's really unique and has a lot of power behind it. Content, networking, connecting. So it's free.
Yeah, now it's time to go have a drink or whatever to celebrate Martin Luther King. one more time before the day ends.
Yeah, time.com/the-march. That's like this thing they did, I think it was last year or the year before. It has all kinds of really cool content in relation to the march that happened and Martin Luther King's speech and things like that. So at the very least, check that out. I'll put it in the chat.
And thank everybody for coming, really.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye now.
Thank you all.